Alright, so after a press conference and a build-up to UFC 288 that frankly made me embarrassed to be a fan of the sport, yet somehow on the other hand still managed to get me absolutely hyped. This card's finally in the books, and you know, it turned out to be a really strange one. I want to get all of this into one video, so as always, like and subscribe. Twitter's in the handle. Let's just go straight into this. Alright, what a terrible advert this was for the standard at middleweight. It reminds us all that there really are no standards outside the rankings, or really outside the top 5, now that I think about it. I picked Ribero and he got the job done. Ribero landing really thunderous leg kicks, and he showed he's really made improvement in his offensive and defensive grappling, which is where things really went south in his last fight with Al Hassan, which he lost by KO. If you come into the octagon with a ridiculous curled mustache like Holmes did, you gotta come in there and start your opponent. And Holmes could have been out of there multiple times. He's young, I don't want to shit on him too much. This was a decent win for Ribero, but they both looked a little sloppy in all honesty. Took me to 1-0, let's move swiftly on. Jesus Christ, I almost forgot about this one. Hawes was literally sleeping before he landed on the ground. I'm going to say this though, I did pick Aliskorov, but he looked really vulnerable in there. This was basically a guy who was billed as Khamzat's hardest ever opponent. And despite the impressive result at the end, there are some holes in this guy's game. I don't know, like the first part of the round, he was looking like he was fighting underwater. He was swinging shots wildly and leaving himself open to really hard body kicks. He threw a wacky head kick in the middle of nowhere that didn't really seem to connect. But judging by the gormless expression on Hall's face, he looked fucked. If you are a main card hop-alonger, look up this KO. It was pretty wild. Aliskorov landed the 1-2 and Hawes was literally sleeping on the way down. Another big dub took me to 2-0. Let's keep going. Alright, I didn't know who the hell Smith was, and Parker Porter is an obese mess of a man. Being real, they both are. This was the most embarrassing performance in heavyweight history, and that's really saying something. Smith literally threw 10 or so of the sloppiest overhands and was so tired, he literally just face planted without being touched. I've never seen anything like it. Who scouted this mess of a man? And I picked him. I must have been out of my goddamn mind. What an embarrassing fat bastard. Porker then basically mounted him and just put hands on him. This was a waste of time. I'm so glad I didn't bet on it, and I'm so glad I told you not to too. I will say, Porker does seem like a lovely tubby lad. I didn't really know that because he almost never wins and I've never heard him speak. Fuck me, what a shit show. This took me to 2-1. Next fight. Alright, I usually go in on women's MMA because I don't care. I genuinely think 99% of female fights fucking suck. They need to be on their own cards, seriously. This has to stop. I did bitch out of this one a little bit. I said I favoured Jandiroba, but I was expecting this to go to a decision, so this was another W for me. Rodriguez has horrendous takedown defense, and she's 5th in the division. She has no ability to frame or get back up. She's absolutely shit, and she main evented a card recently. While I was watching this, all I was thinking was, how horrible does this make Lemos look? I did say Jandiroba was not to be slept on. She dominated on the ground for all 3 rounds to a clear decision. Whaley must have been quaking in her boots. Let's never speak of this again. Anyway, it took me to 3-1, so I was happy with that. Next. Alright, I picked Chaos to close out my parlay, and I don't know, man. Chaos has no defensive awareness whatsoever, and he was swinging pretty wildly, mostly hitting air or catching the guard. Bodoya unsettled him with leg kicks and a stiff jab through rounds 2 and 3. This was a dogfight, but it was technically very horrible to watch. Bodoya was given 30-27 on one of the judges' scorecards, and the other 2 gave it 29-28 for Chaos, which sums up how sloppy and hard to score this was. I did pick Williams, and to be honest, I wouldn't have complained if Bodoya had got his hand raised. So far, this card had been an absolute dud, and this fight really does deserve no detailed reaction, so it's not going to get one. Pick against Chaos if he fights anyone that's actually good. Took me to 4-1 though, so give me that shit. I did get away with this one though. Alright, finally, this was a fucking fight. I was ready to sack this whole card off. It just seemed cursed at this point. What a great performance by Kennedy. First round, both men were hurt in different moments. Kennedy did really well when he did take a smack to recover enough and clinch. And once he recovered a bit, he was able to land really brutal knees up the middle, which I think was really instrumental in wearing Clarke down. Clarke did really well to make it to round 2 once Cejudo took over and started hurting him at the end of the first round. Second round, you could see Clarke didn't really have much left, and Cejudo kept going to the middle with knees. I really love fighters that soften up the body and use that as a strategy. Cejudo ended up locking in a standing guillotine. I've loved that move since Jones did it to brutally finish Machida like years ago. I actually thought Clarke tapped once he got locked into it and that the ref had missed it, but maybe it was just the glove connecting off of his leg or something, and it just appeared to be a tap. It ended up not mattering anyway. Clarke ended up getting choked out and going to sleep. Fair play to him. He did make this a fight, so he does deserve some credit for that. Took me to 5-1 and really on a roll. Alright, this next one was a little sad for me. You know I love Dober time. This was never going to be anything but a war, and it was really fun while it lasted. Both men were picking away at range, going for big shots. Dober was mostly leading things to begin with. You could see he was chasing him down and controlling the position in the cage the most. But both men were honestly finding the mark, and despite the fact I thought that Dober was landing the better shots early on, his face was more visibly damaged. Eventually anyway, they just fucked off the game plans and both started swinging wildly, and that's not really something you want to do with Frevola. He seems to come out quite a lot in those situations. Anyway, Dober, who was, like I said, carrying more visible damage, he ended up getting caught pretty badly, dropped, and just pounded out on the ground. This is really the story of Dober's career. He manages to get some momentum by winning 2, 3, 4 in a row, and then he hits a wall. He takes a fight that he shouldn't, and then he gets sent tumbling back down the rankings. Frevola talked about going for a title, which was fucking hilarious. Never gonna happen. But, there's still some fun fights to make with both these guys. I ended up dropping this one because I did pick Dober, but I was cool with it. It was a good fight. Frevola called out Pimlet, which he probably won't get. Pimlet's a complete pussy. But I wouldn't mind if he does, because I think he fucks Paddy up. I mean, anyone does, really, who's left in the division. This brought an end to the prelims, and we're on to the main card. Right. Okay, Kron Gracie is absolute garbage. I don't think I really need to add anything else, but I'm going to anyway. He got smacked up on the feet at distance and spent the whole fight positioning himself to pull guard. The strange thing was though, when he had finally managed at various moments to do that, he did fuck all on the bottom. Jourdain just kept it safe, went on the ground, and was significantly more skilled standing. What really pissed me off about Kron's strategy in this, he looked like a much better striker when he fought, I think it was Swanson a few years ago. If I'm correct, it might be somebody else. But once he realized he was going to get him to the ground the first time and wasn't doing anything with it, he had no alternative game plan and just kept going back to that. And that was really just, it showed to me that he's got no other wrinkles to his game. Kron's not an MMA fighter, in my opinion. The Gracies are MMA frauds. They should just stick to jiu-jitsu contests and take that bum Ryan Hall with them. This isn't UFC 1. He looked like an absolute fish out of water, and by the end, it looked like he just couldn't be fucked in there. It was a nice win for Jourdain. I picked him. He called out Barbosa, which would be a very fun scrap. I'd like to see that. 6-2. Rolling on. Alright, I've been calling Evloev on Twitter a hype job all week. I think this guy is so overrated. Massive credit to Lopez. He basically rolled out of bed for this one. Beginning of the first round, Lopez cracked him hard and really hurt him. And it ended up on the ground, where he almost caught Evloev in an arm bar and then a triangle neck choke at the end of the round. For me, that gave him the round, even though Evloev had control time. He didn't really do that much with it. Second round, Lopez showed signs of gassing, which is understandable after basically taking the fight short notice. He did have a few moments still. This guy's a really tough kid, and he deserves another shot. He's got very decent hands, and on the ground, he's a real danger. He was looking for submissions the entire time. He never gave up on himself. Movsar did eventually ground this one out, and he did manage to escape some dangerous positions, so he does deserve some credit for that. But any Dagestani nut riders that thinks this man gets anywhere near Volk is having a fucking laugh. This took me to 7-2 though. He called out Ortega, which is also a terrible matchup for him. I think Ortega submits him, you know, if that fight gets made. But I was happy enough anyway. This took me to 7-2. All right, this one was quick. We have a new contender. Yan was absolutely excellent in this fight. She kept it at a safe distance for as long as it lasted. She was landing really nice straight shots down the pipe and waited for the moment to catch Andrade with a massive right. And then she just finished her with ground and pound. Destroyed her. China is a really massive market, and they need to make this fight with Wei Li. I got this one wrong. I did say it was going to be close, and I advised people not to bet on it because I certainly wasn't sticking this in any parlay, and I'm glad I didn't. Great statement win for Jourdain. It took me to 7-3, but I think this is much better for the division. You know, Andrade's had plenty of opportunities. If she'd won, she's already been absolutely smashed by Wei Li, and based on this performance, it would have been the same thing. So I'd like to see that fight. Two Chinese contenders will be massive for that side of the market. Maybe a Chinese fight night card somewhere down the line. Yeah, that's the fight that's got to be made. Very impressive performance. Alright, so I picked Belal, and I really wanted to be wrong. I always talk about body investment, and Muhammad did this exceptionally well throughout the fight. I said he was going to wear Burns down, and that's basically how it played out. I did say it was going to be more with the jabs, and he did use those, but it was the kicks to the body that really wore Burns down, and he was chipping away at his left shoulder. Burns looked defeated by this second round, and there's no excuses. He was really outworked and couldn't deal with Muhammad's constant switching of stances. Burns did crack him a few times at different points, but Belal pretty much ate everything and kept the pressure high. Plus side for me is that as the president of the Fuck Belal fan club, he didn't really show me anything in this fight that he's capable of doing anything against Leon. He had a bit of a range advantage against Burns. He's not going to have that against Leon. And I just think Leon picks him apart. In that first fight, it was very clear that Leon was on his way to beating the fuck out of him. And I don't see anything from Muhammad here that changes that. If it does end up being Colby, I also think that Colby's going to be able to apply a forward pressure in ways that Burns couldn't do in this fight. I give credit to Belal. He fought well. And sadly, that's the end of the road for Burns as a contender at welterweight. This took the record to 8-3. So I got the win, but I wasn't too pleased about it. Alright, this one was a very close fight. Sterling used his length really well. He piled up significant strikes throughout the fight, and I think that's what really got him the win here. He also managed to land a few takedowns, and he managed to get some significant back time at the end of the first. And I think it was the fourth round where he also managed to take him down at the end of the round. So that gave him two clear rounds in that one, because they were pretty close. Cejudo comparatively was less effective on the feet, and he really struggled with the range and stance switching. But he did have some rounds where he managed to get Sterling into good positions. He was cranking the neck, applying pressure to it. Very smart strategy. I think Sterling's biggest issue that could have potentially lost him this fight was he was making a lot of silly takedown attempts at times, which must have visually looked very terrible to the judges, because he was failing a lot of them miserably, and he was running the risk of gassing himself out. As I said, Sterling did land another significant takedown at the end of the fourth, and I had him up 3-1 at this point. I thought he clearly won the first. He landed more significant strikes in the second, where there was very little else. And I gave the third to Henry. It might have been the other way around. It might have been the second to Henry. But either way, by the time the fourth round was over, I had him up clearly 3-1 at that point. It's important to note that the corner work from both men's camps were excellent between rounds, and it's very interesting to see when fighters at this very high level listen to their instructions and make adjustments as the circumstances change and develop. It's why championship fights at this level are so exciting and interesting. I felt going into the fifth that Henry needed a finish, and he just didn't manage to get it done. I do think he won that round, so I had it 3-2 to Sterling. It was called a split decision, and I do think the right guy got the nod. I picked Sterling, he got the win. I do have to say though, it did really suck that his own fans booed him out, because this was a really good performance, and he didn't deserve to get mugged off like that. There was also like a really uncomfortable moment where the UFC really messed up the pacing of this one. It was very similar to what happened in one the other night, where they brought O'Malley out as a contender, and they clearly didn't have a plan for what was going on, because the talk between the two of them was... They obviously knew it was going to happen, and the talk between the two of them was just... Yeah, it was cringe. And then O'Malley then ends up getting into a verbal altercation with Merab. It was just all a bit of a shit show. Henry then, you know, it looked like he'd taken off his gloves and that he was going to announce his retirement. I reckon he does retire. I just think he didn't want to go out in the cage like that after all the shit he's been talking. I'm so glad that I'm not going to have to listen to this prick anymore, because the last 3 years have been insufferable listening to this guy saying he's going to come back and dominate this and dominate that. Anyway, it was a very sour way to end the card with the crowd and the fuck up with the face-off, but, you know, it is what it is. For the record, I'm calling this now. I think Sterling does nasty things to O'Malley, but I just think he's too well-rounded, but we'll break that down when we come to it. Alright, so with a record of 9-3 on this card, it was a nice boost to the record. It brings me up to 110 and 54 on the year. So it boosts me from 65% to 67%, so that's good. Want to try and climb back up to 70 if I can. I'll be back tomorrow to look at the next fight cards. To be honest, it looks like shit, so I'm not really too enthusiastic about that one. But you'll hear from me anyway. It'll probably be on Monday. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the card. Very strange one for me. And yeah, I'll see you all on Monday. Have a great rest of the weekend.